30 days. Those fines go into that timing runs for a 3-year period. The other differences primarily are cigar packaging and pricing, and no sales of blunt wraps. All stores have been notified of all of these via memo. They've had a chance to hear our discussion both in March and some of this discussion way back in March 2020. So nothing should be really surprising to any of the vendors. They've basically been living with these regulations for almost 3 years since they were adopted during 2020, most of them by Governor Baker. So I'm wondering if Katie, or no, you're not here for that. You're here for microblading. So we do not have anybody here for this public hearing. So I'm assuming that everybody has heard what they needed to hear and that they've come to terms with it. Then, is that right? Karen, I'm looking to you for, yeah.
We didn't get any written comments. We got a few inquiries from, we got a few inquiries on,
Oops, can't do it.
I can get rid of mine.
I don't think anyone.
There you go.
Just
Space.
We got a couple of inquiries. One was from an attorney's office. One was on behalf of a client, a tobacco licensee. One was from I want to call a lobbyist, but I don't know what other word to call, but it was somebody that works for the retailers. And today we received an inquiry from a student or an intern advocacy that felt that they could come tonight to give support to the board if needed. But I gave them a copy of the regulations and I explained to them that we had our local reg, we were incorporating things that were above and beyond from the state reg. And I said that to all three of them, and that was the end of that.
Right.
Because I told them they were already in effect. They basically, both regulations have been being used to enforce since 2020.
Right.
2020, I can't remember now.
2020.
Yeah, 2020, right? December
2020 is when they went into effect.
So that was that. No, none of the retailers, there was that one gentleman that was here last time, but it had nothing to do with the regulation. It had to do with the sale of
Cigars. So it was one of the issues that is addressed by it. So he was concerned about the packaging. And yeah, and I think I saw the letter from the man, he was the Public Health Advocacy Institute at Northeastern, and right. And what they've done is banned all tobacco sales, and we're not doing that. Or what they've advocated for, and that was done in Brookline. Which
they were here at the last round.
I do recall that. So in light of the fact that there's nobody else here to speak up about it, I guess that means that we are ready to take a vote on whether or not to adopt these regulations as our own. Unless there's any further discussion about these from anybody, any other comments or questions, or we've been looking at these for a long time.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think we should officially close the public hearing that has no public. And then we can vote. So.
Okay, so I guess this is the end of the public hearing moment. And I would welcome a motion to move this regulation forward.
Yeah, and I assume, Cheryl, when the version we approve is this, but without the bold and italics, that shows the changes, right? Yeah. So, okay. I see you nodding yes. So yeah, so I'll move to approve the new draft regulations that have been discussed at this meeting and circulated prior to the meeting.
And is there a second?
I'll second it.
Great. And all in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful, thank you. So we've now approved the new tobacco regulations. I guess they're in effect as of now.
Do you,
that right?
okay, do you want to choose an effective date?
Oh, well, given that they've been
Okay,
basically in effect, right?
Yeah.
If we're, all they're in effect as of now, immediately.
okay.
All right, Cheryl, thank you so much for your time on all of this.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. I'm actually a little surprised that nobody shut up.
Enthusiasm
No.
last meeting.
I think that the previous public health meetings that we had when the regulations were much more stringent,
Right,
um,
right,
much more stringent. That's when we had the full house and.
Right. yeah, we've had a lot of, there were a lot of people here for those last, in the 2020 rounds. All right, moving on to our next item, it's a discussion on body art regulations. And this came up because we've been approached by somebody who's interested in opening up a microblading salon here in Concord. And this is not something that currently exists here. And the current regulations, there are no state regulations that guide microblading. So it's up to each state and locality or each locality to enact their regulations. And so somebody from the Great Meadows Public Health Collaborative looked at local Board of Health regulations to look at what is relevant. And this has been drafted based on that. Karen, those other versions,
I gave
you
them
gave
out.
them out?
I
Okay,
passed them out. Everybody has the updated copy on their, in front of them with
Right.
Mark's edits.
right, so they've already been edited. And, this is something that I've not known too much about. So I had to do a little bit of learning myself on this one. And I understand we have some expertise on the line here with us. Katie, you are the person who's made the inquiry, is that right? Okay. And Kurt, you own the tattoo gallery in town, so you work with the existing regulations that we have. Is that right? Okay, thank you both for attending.
Thank you.
Kurt, can you talk? We can see if we can hear you.
Is it working now?
Now it is.
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay.
nice to hear your voices. Thank you.
Thanks.
No, go ahead, Melanie.
I wanted to share that we took the draft regulation, and I worked with feedback from Kurt, feedback from Dr. Kring to kind of adopt a modified version, for what you have in front of you. And got feedback, already sent it out to Kurt and Katie for their input. But I certainly want them to have opportunity to comment. And everybody discuss if you had any questions. I've learned a lot as well. I still have more to learn. But Kurt and a colleague of his came and met with me and reviewed the regulations, and we talked a lot of detail about what was there, what would be benefit the industry. Put some words specific around if somebody was gonna have an apprentice, like what years of experience, so that's unique. And some definitions in here are about what semi-permanent makeup is, includes that. That's the biggest update, is that wasn't spelled out specifically. So the training, there's a training program for semi-permanent makeup that you can get a certification. So that kind of takes that into account for what makes an option for what the training should be for semi-permanent makeup.
Right, so that was one of the big difference. The other big difference was just even including in the definition of body art to include microblading and micropigmentation and cosmetic tattooing. Is that right? That's the
Yes.
differences.
Correct.
Okay. Since this was new, I mean, I guess one of the questions that I have that I'm hoping you guys can answer is what are the risks to microblading? Can you talk a little bit about that and what's kind of the incidence of problems with it when it goes wrong, when it's not done well?
Katie,
I
can you
would
speak?
say it's cleanliness. You have to have a clean environment like a tattoo gallery, basically. So it's almost the same setup.
Mhm.
Everything has to be sterile. Otherwise, the client would be at risk for infection.
Mhm.
But really, there's no other risks because it's it's a little bit different from tattooing because it's just under the first layer of skin, the dermal layer.
Mhm.
So it's a little more superficial and not quite as permanent.
And it's not quite as permanent because it's not going to the same depth. Is that why? Or is it the type of ink used?
It's the same type of ink. It's just not going to the same depth, I believe. Is that right, Kurt?
I was under the impression that that cosmetic pigments are slightly watered down.
Oh, okay.
I know that you know, I know a cosmetic tattooer and she has to order a complete different line of ink made by the same companies, but there is a slight difference, and I'm not sure if it has to do with, how much pigment is in there compared to how much, other products like witch hazel, distilled water, other things that make up the base of the ink. I'm not sure if it's slightly different.
There are thinners too that we would use to
Right.
thin out the ink just so it runs smoother when we're inserting the blade. And it gets a better, more consistent application.
Sure.
I do, while we're on ink though, I only use specific inks that are American made. I think that is another thing that like if people are ordering inks from other countries like China, the ink isn't really regulated.
Yes.
So that could be something that we might want to include. I don't know if we need to get down to that level. But that would certainly be an issue.
Are these are they individual inks for each client? In other words, you just use one bottle for one patient?
So what you typically do is you have an ink cap, right? So it's a little plastic cap that you set up at your station, and you fill that cap. A bottle can last you, months on end. You don't go through that many, typical bottles, maybe 1 ounce, 1 to 2 ounces, but you only use this little cap full. So you just a one-time disperse that into that cap, and then, and then that gets all thrown away at the end of the procedure. So nothing's getting poured back into the bottle or anything like that. That was kind of an old stigma they had back in the day, that people were doing that, but nobody really does that. It's not expensive enough that people would ever do that. You just have this little cap, and then you just, one-time use, and then that all gets thrown away at the end of the procedure. So
It's similar to an eyedropper. I mean,
yeah,
you can't put it back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you suck the ink out and put it into something, Kurt?
Drop
so,
it.
Drop it?
yeah, it's just a little bottle, and you just drop it into the ink cap.
But the
You know, like-
tattoo needle itself sucks it up.
Yes.
That's what
yeah.
she's asking.
You're-
Yeah.
you're dipping it. You're dipping whether you're using, the microblade for the microblading, or if you're using a tattoo machine in the needle, you're basically dipping it in like a quill pen, like old school, dip it in the ink and you're writing kind of thing. That the ink is it's not hypodermic. It's not inside a tube. It's just coated on either the micropigment tool, or it's on the machine needle. So it's
Single
not,
use, the needle.
it's all single use. Yeah, even the tools that Kate's using is one-time use, they go into a sharps container afterwards.
Right. Yeah, and that's all spelled out here, not the requirement about sources of the ink as you were
Right.
suggesting.
Yeah.
Well,
But
the FDA has not, they're making moves to regulate things, but they haven't taken complete control yet. In other countries, they have, a lot of over in the UK and Australia and stuff like that. They're really regimented on what we use. But I mean, any self-respecting practitioner is going to use the best, because there is a difference in quality. And we like to pride ourselves on, like, it's vegan friendly, made in the US as well, stuff like that. So I don't know how you'd regulate that, but yeah, anybody that knows what they're doing is going to order quality stuff.
Katie, can you speak a little bit about the training that you go through to do this work?
Yeah, so I have the woman who trained me she's called a master trainer. She's gone through many levels through a microblading academy. And then she serves as my sort of as my mentor and my teacher. And I've completed 100 hours. And part of that is the anatomy and the anatomy requirement that we were talking about. I've done bloodborne pathogens, CPR, first aid. So that course really covers everything. Not all courses do. So it's good that you have it broken down here to make sure that the course that the person has taken touches base on all of those things, like the color theory. And then also just the actual procedure itself, how to keep things sanitary, and so on. So that I took that course. I have certifications for that, but above that, I can also get AAM certification, which is an extra level where I have to submit, I believe it's 6 models for approval by the AAM board, which is the Academy of Microblading. American Academy of Microblading.
And we say 6 models, so six brows that you've done that you submit as examples.
Yeah. So, and in my course, I also worked on live client.
Oh, so the 100 hours is just classroom time. It's not actual time working on a client.
No, it's classroom time and time working on the client, and also going through the procedures of setup, cleanup, all those protocols. So sort of inclusive of everything. And then if you want to obtain additional AAM certification, then you have to submit more model work.
So it looks like one of the big differences between tattooing and microblading is just the much more extensive training required to be a tattoo artist. Is that right? Like you're going through much more curve.
Yeah. The apprentice programs usually can take up to 2 years, and they break it down. How many examples of small black and white tattoos have you done? How many examples of small writing? And it breaks down into medium-sized color work, cover-up work. There's all these different regulations. I forget offhand, but it's something like 2,400 hours or something. It should be total. Which is, it can take up to 2 years depending on how frequently you have clientele.
They're quite different because I'm basically just doing the same sort of technique over and over again, and it's more of a superficial thing. His is art, and there's a lot more technique to learn.
Right. It sounds like it. If one is black and white and color variations, size variations, there's a lot of variation in what a tattoo is going to be. But what you're doing is.
There's some variation, but it's all a version of the same thing, essentially.
Is microblading just for eyebrows then?
No, so it's primarily for eyebrows and lips, but it's expanding into everything. You can microblade hair strokes on, your head to fill in like receding hairlines. People microblade blush. It's you can do areola for reconstructive surgery patients. I'm sorry about my dog, which is something I'd actually like to offer too. So it can be more extensive, but it requires coursework.
So any of those variations would require additional coursework that is available to you?
Exactly. It's an additional certification that you would have to get.
Okay, other questions? You talked about the, sanitation as being one of the concerns, the primary, things to be aware of in a training. When things go wrong, what happens? I'm imagining that when people aren't abiding by those, those careful sanitation requirements or aren't properly trained, that infections might result, or you could have a botch, job. What's the recourse then, and what follow-up happens if that occurs?
You want me to take it?
I'd like either one of you. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, well, I guess, yeah, somebody could get infected, right? From, unclean, equipment or, cross-contamination, not good, aseptic, technique, making sure, nothing is contaminated the workspace, everything was set up with gloves on, everything's one time, disposable use, things like that. You could also work on somebody and you could transmit, anything they could potentially have elsewhere if you weren't careful about, discarding your gloves, washing your hands, making sure you're using barrier films. The list goes on. It does take a long time to get proper training in these procedures. And that's where I'm always the most hesitant with any kind of new regulations is, a botched tattoo or something that wasn't drawn well is one thing, but health risks are completely, they should not be tolerated. So it's like, that's why, it was very important to spend that much time working under somebody and seeing how they do it, as well as, the bloodborne pathogens class we have to take, the anatomy class we have to take. It's, nothing replaces that one-on-one, watching somebody break down and set up, for each procedure, and just having, and eventually you take over for them and you break them down, set them up as part of your apprenticeship, and you just, that repetition really helps instill all those kind of practices. So, it's tough to put a number on that, like how many procedures you should have under your belt before you could be responsible with such things,
Kurt, is it 2,400 hours now? Right?
I'm sorry, say it again.
It's 2,400 hours for an apprentice, right? To work under you?
I believe so. Yeah, I gotta look at the regs again.
That's what they said.
Each town, I said that I think I'm doing from memory, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was, 2,400 hours
It says
or
it right here.
equivalent of 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it was.
Right.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Right.
I didn't see it in the reading, but do you have a self-reporting for adverse outcome? Do you guys have like a web page or through the agency that would pull data, say if you did have an infection? If a certain center had a certain office had X amount of infections that you could self-report or patient self-report?
No, I've never heard of anything like that. This postage that we have to have, incident reports, stuff like that. But it's all word of mouth. If people were getting infected from tattoos in the studio, they wouldn't last long on the internet. You know what I mean? The reviews and stuff, they would be flagged right away. I don't know if there's any kind of official reporting that's done, but
Yeah, not to my knowledge.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about as well, whether there was some kind of centralized database. And I imagine that word of mouth is also a big,
So it's through our permit. They would have to, you would have to be,
right,
because we're the,
Yeah,
we're the regulator.
right.
So
I
it
would say the
be-
town would be the first one to know,
Mhm.
Other,
Establishment record keeping.
But it doesn't
Would
go
it
reported
go
to
to
the
the town,
state.
or would it go to a hospital that would eventually report to us? Is
Or
that
the
what it would
state.
be if it's like say it's a MRSA infection or something like that, that may?
If it came up through the Maven, we
well,
but yes.
the tricky thing is that we could do everything right on our end, 100%. Send them home with the proper aftercare instructions, all the disclosure forms and everything. But we have no idea what these people are doing with this open wound as they go home. They could be sleeping with their cat, get cat dander in it. They could be having a flight overseas the next day. Like, we really don't know. You know what I mean? So I don't know how anybody could actually police that and be like, well, this happened on the site that it was done. How could somebody tell a difference between that and, you know, this is something they did in their own care afterwards, caring for, you know, this fresh area, you know, I mean, it's
You
very
guys
hard
sign
to say.
consents? Is there
Yeah, oh,
consents
yeah.
that go through the whole thing, the list?
Yeah.
and Something comes up, this is who you would like talk to, if like, say there was like a big infection or something, or
Yeah,
something
we
out of
just,
the ordinary, they spike a
we-
fever after a tattoo.
exactly. We have a consent form that they sign beforehand. And then we also have an aftercare sheet we hand out that says, you know, things to look out for, things, you know, how to take care of the tattoo, and then things like, you know, fever, redness around the area, you know, weeping wound, anything like that. Like, we have it's all written out. But we always urge people, if you have any questions about, you know, aftercare or healing, give us a call, send us an email, send us pictures, and you know, we can go from there, tell you how to take care of it. But like I said, we can't police what people do with their fresh ink when they leave, you know what I mean? So it's just a tough area.
So that's part of the inspection. So they do get inspected
Mhm.
on a yearly basis by the Board of Health. And that's part of the checklist, or if you will, is about documentation and what their procedures are.
Mhm. And there is in here, the client informed consent form about that as well. Making sure that their aftercare instructions have been provided, and medical history, et cetera. So, Katie, are you permitted to do microblading in any other town currently?
No, not yet, not yet. I plan to get it done in New York,
Uh-huh.
in the town of Southold, just because I have a home out there and I do go there for the summer.
Nice.
But I have not done that yet. This was sort of my first step.
Got it.
So if I'm understanding right, so our current regulation is, it's the greater of 2 years or 2,400 hours of experience.
Mhm.
And that's for the full suite of tattoo services.
Yep.
And it doesn't currently specifically specify microblading, but you know, this is sort of a newer trend than the regulation at the time. So what is the reason why, you know, a full tattoo artist needs 2,400 hours and we think microblading is 100 hours is sufficient? What are
That's- That's
It's
why
a-
I came to you guys, because there's not really like a training course for tattooing. It's more of an art that's learned through an apprenticeship. So it didn't really apply to my situation because I did complete my training. I have certificates. And so while they're very similar, there's still some major differences. And because the work that I'm doing is much more simplified than tattooing, a lot of those guidelines that are in the current document just don't quite apply.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because at the end of the day, you are breaking the skin. So a lot of those techniques kind of overlap. The thing with the 24 hours of, even though it's a different art form, at the end of your apprenticeship, not only have you learned a lot, but you've also built up a portfolio showing, you know, all these different tattoos, different styles of tattoos you can do. So any prospective client that comes in can look at a body of your work and feel confident, you know, this person has done a whole bunch of tattoos. And I don't know what you get at the end of the course you took. Do you leave there with a portfolio with, you know, multiple clientele's eyebrows and examples of your work, things like that, you know?
The AAM board certification requires the minimum of, I believe it's 6. But then beyond that, if you would like, personally, right now, I'm taking on clients that are like friends
Yeah.
who are, willing to participate as a model. And that would be my portfolio, but it's not going to be the same for everybody. So that's why I think requiring the AAM certification is going to be a good further step, because then you will have, it's a small body of work, but you will have a body of work to display to clients.
And when you say, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
This one says right now what we have written is 100 hours with the coursework and then an additional 200 hours of time. So
Oh,
what
we're
we,
getting that together? Okay.
yes, yeah, that's what we're putting. It's the coursework plus additional 200 hours. So it's part 1 and part 2. If you're
Okay.
specific for permanent cosmetics only, microblading, micropigmentation, permanent makeup, it's saying both 1 and 2.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay. That was that in the Great Meadows?
That was part of the Great Meadows. And that's part of the discussion. The other tattoo artist, semi-permanent makeup artist that I met with she did the full in a town in Framingham. They didn't have this regulation, so she did 24 hours. It's a big,
Right.
she had a lot of experience doing that type of technique. So we debated it back and forth quite a bit about what's comparable, what's reasonable. So this is what's presented.
Framingham?
Yeah, what was her woman's name, Kurt?
Christiana, and I never know how to pronounce her last name. It's
It-
Pelliccia.
The regulations
Palakia.
didn't, right, so regulations didn't exist, so she became a tattoo artist. But her
Yeah.
specialty, if you will, is this type of
Yeah.
semi-permanent makeup. She doesn't
But-
microblade as much as do other
But she
techniques.
does both, yeah. So, and we were trying to discern the difference between strictly microblading, which would be using a specific tool to mimic, eyebrow hairs, or other cosmetic tattooing requires an actual tattoo machine. In which case you're using the machine, so it's a bit different, takes a bit more training. I don't think they cover that in the course you took, but
No,
Wow.
they did. We do machine and blading.
okay.
So we
Yeah.
do both.
And I had run into the same issue, I don't know, 5 years ago. I was still kind of new to the town, but I had a lady approach me that was working in Boston, doing microblading, but she only had an esthetician's license. And I remember not being able to figure out how to get her licensed in Concord. And she ran into this into most towns. It's because nothing is in place for this. There's no regulations. And for most, finding an apprenticeship with an actual tattoo artist is hard to do because they're not trying to be a full tattoo artist. They're trying to do a specific thing. So
That's,
that's
I,
what we're working on.
I think that's part of the problem. I mean, you can take these courses, but in the industry, they don't do extensive apprenticeships like a tattoo artist. I mean, it's probably, I mean, it's possible, but it's just not set up and structured that way.
What does your master trainer do?
She does
Master trainer.
She does microblading and powder brow, and then that's also what she trains. So she runs courses.
Okay, so you're not apprenticing under her. She just. does the
Well,
initial
no,
part.
we return back to her to work on clients, and we also shadow her. So
And
there
what-
is an apprenticeship element within those 100 hours. But then that's it.
What state is this course offered in?
It's in Northborough. It's in Massachusetts.
And does she give you any kind of, heads up that you might run into this red tape upon completion of class trying to get?
She just said, go to a town that has microblading already written into their, their regulations for permitting.
She have a list or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a list of, well, no, there's a list of towns that, no, she just gave us a list of towns just so we could reference what was available. But like I
Is
could
that-
have gone to, I think like Acton, and I think they may have had something written in, but my problem was I found a really wonderful space in West Concord, like next to my house. So it just made sense. So I tried doing it this way.
I would be curious to see what she could recommend if you were to reach out to her via email or something and just see if you get a list of towns that she knows of. She must know of some. She can't hold a class and
Oh, she
train all
does,
these people.
yeah. Northborough is one of them, but then there's a lot of people in Northborough who are doing microblading.
What I mean is it'd be great to see what those towns that accept this, what they have for regulations in place as a comparative,
Yeah, that's what I had sent a document over. Because I had gone through some of, the surrounding towns. And I referenced what their requirements were, and I had put those in an email to you guys.
But the state model document, the MHOA model document has the two parts. So the part
Mhm.
that you gave me is the first part with the certification, but most of the guidance documents also include hours of time.
From the
So-
state.
That's where I think you and I are disagreeing, Katie. It's like, it's the training certification and the for that specific application type. But then most of the guidance documents do have some amount of time. If they don't, it's the same as a tattoo practitioner. It's 2,400 hours. But
And so this is coming from the state of Massachusetts?
they have MHOA, Mass Health Officers, and the Boston Public Health Commission has a model regulation. And in
Okay.
it is this, what we have here. It's kind of
Okay.
a similar.
It was the 200 hours of prep.
Yeah, so it's the 100-hour coursework and then plus the $200. So our 1 and 2
No,
is on page.
If that's the
18 and
case, then
19.
I think it is reasonable. It's just not what I was led to understand.
the 200 hours, is that time with client? Is that 200?
It's a 200-hour.
It says
Apprenticeship.
observing procedures being performed and performing at least 50 complete supervised procedures.
Okay, 50, okay.
Sounds like it's the experience part. There's the training, which is the first 100 hours, then the second 200 hours is the experience part of it.
And it's actually common with like nursing and that type of thing, like, aides, healthcare aides. It's like study and then do a bunch. And then
Barbers as well.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's what we
See one,
call
do
it.
one,
Yeah,
teach one.
and it's true with everything
Yeah, do one.
in medical,
That's
right?
really quick.
Yeah.
See one, do one, teach one.
Yeah, so it's not uncommon, like that's kind of, they're probably following more of a medical model. Which sounds like that makes perfect sense from my standpoint.
Right.
In the Massachusetts model, is it 200 hours or is it like a blank for number of hours?
I believe it's this one. I'd have to confirm that, Mark. Off the top of my head. Like I looked at some and then
Yeah.
the other inspector like put this draft together. We went
Yeah.
back and I looked at a lot of different ones. But it generally has the class and additional experience for this specific training.
Yep.
Whereas the other tattoo artists, there's no training for a certification from a tattoo artist. But,
Right, so they don't have the same training because they have way more apprenticeship, which is sort of like the
we have a
training.
lot more apprenticeship hours, like
Yeah.
way more apprenticeship hours and time, but there's
So some more opportunity. Okay. Other questions for Katie or Kurt? I'm just conscious of your time, which I appreciate a lot. While we have these experts on the line, any questions for them further? Do you have a question, Karen?
I was gonna say, was there questions about this, other than the microblading, weren't there questions about an apprentice just going out and being?
Right, we put some wording in here about apprentice and the amount of time. Like in order to have an apprentice, to have 4 years work experience. That was,
Oh, in order to take on an
in order,
apprentice.
that would, and that is not in the state, in the model document. That was something that we kind of like, what would it be appropriate to start mentoring anybody, either semi-permanent makeup or tattoo? What is an appropriate time? So it's a discussion point.
Katie, you mentioned powder brows.
Yeah.
How does that differ from microblading?
So microblading, you use a hand tool, and it's essentially a grouping of needles that
Right.
slice into the top layer of the skin. And then you apply pigment while you're doing it, and then also after you've, gone over the eyebrow. Powder brows uses an actual tattoo gun, but it's using an extremely small needle to fill in the brow to give it more of like a makeup look. And it's essentially, it's essentially those two things that you do over and over again with
Mhm.
different
So-
brush stroke styles sometimes.
So if you're trained in doing a powder brow, you're doing that, or you're just doing that. You're not
Yeah.
using it elsewhere. As you described microblading, you wouldn't be doing that technique elsewhere.
You mean elsewhere on the body?
I mean, on the body. You were saying that microblading is used now in a couple of other places for other, not just brows.
Part of the problem is that the term microblading is being used broadly to talk about something that is actually two different things. So yeah, any other part of the body, you wouldn't use that hand tool. You would use a tattoo gun to fill in.
And some people are doing, it's a specialty to do, I would say, replacement, right? Tattooing on body parts or nipples
Yeah.
or something like that. So it's a medical.
Yeah.
There's some of that in that similar type procedure.
As time goes on, it continues to get more and more extensive. So it's kind of interesting what draws the line between, a microblading artist and a tattoo artist. But anything that's kind of simulating like natural body parts like hair, tinting the lips, I think that would fall under that category.
And it sounds like, I mean, in my mind, that just speaks to the need for kind of continuing education, like ongoing training as these techniques evolve. Right. Or as people adapt them for different parts of the body.
Yeah, you have to get certified for each new technique that you're doing.
It's not what is that called when you go to the cosmetology and that's just
No, it's different.
different?
Like Botox and that kind of thing.
Like in this.
Esthetician. I can never pronounce that word either.
Esthetician. Yeah, I don't have an esthetician license. That's something just like a completely different thing, but it seems like it would fall under the same
Do
category.
you have like hours to maintain your certification? Do you have training hours that are required?
Like continuing throughout the year, you mean?
Yeah, like continuing ed, right?
No. It's just that initial licensing. And then if you choose to continue on, you can continue education, doing additional microblading techniques, different brush stroke techniques, and so on. But that's a choice.
All right, we're not, at this point, the purpose of this conversation was really to look at these regulations carefully, learn a little bit. This was educational for us. We're not in a position to vote on them at this point because we need to, just make sure that what we've now discussed is incorporated into here and makes sense. And we will follow up with this discussion at the May meeting.
Okay.
Right?
May not even be voted on. If you have.
I don't think we're ready to vote on it yet.
Another-
I need to, I mean, I learned a lot about this today, more than I ever knew, but
More than
That's
you ever
still
wanted to know.
learning more. I mean, I'm looking right now at Acton. It seems like Acton has a lower hours requirement, but that it's actually still the same for microblading or body art or other things.
Some of them are. So some
Yeah.
regulations don't separate out
Right.
the semi-permanent makeup, so that's a discussion point
Yeah.
between, so that it's the same number of hours as an apprenticeship and.
Yeah, so Acton just as an example, just one example, right? So there are 150 procedures and or 500 hours for
Right.
apprenticeship.
Is
So
that for all types?
I think it is. I think
All
it
types
is.
of body art.
Yeah.
And they don't require a certificate?
Again, I'm looking at this real time as we're
Okay,
talking about. They require like CPR certification, other things, but they don't. It seems like they have one apprenticeship model that applies to everything.
mhm.
It's softer than ours is on the 2,400 hours tattoo, but I think it's actually everything being the
Correct.
same still.
Some of them
So-
are.
And for me, from a Board of Health standpoint, it's not, I can see why maybe someone needs a bigger portfolio for clients to feel comfortable that it's gonna be, come out good or whatever, right? And so maybe microblading is easier in that sense. But from a health standpoint, what we care about is, people having the right safety protocols, everything else. Like I'm not sure why I certainly wouldn't want less safety.
I'm also curious
experience
as to
training,
whether this will
you know.
branch out to other areas like, lip injections, Botox, that kind of thing. Because we'll probably be in the same spot discussing this. It all seems like it's kind of in the same area from a health standpoint. Sure, we have probably regulations for each one of those items, but I'm not sure. Is that something that eventually you would get into in your studio, or is that
No,
something
that's a-
totally different?
Yeah, it's totally different. You have to be a registered nurse to do Botox injections. And you have to be an esthetician, I believe.
To do the
I'm-
filler type stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it seems similar, but it's actually very different. And so I wouldn't go into any of that. I would just strictly stay with micropigmentation.
Yeah, although interestingly, the Acton regulation includes that too.
Those
Collagen induction
collagen.
therapy.
Yeah,
They
part
just
of
lump it
theirs
all
too.
together.
Yeah.
That's.
I mean,
surprising.
it's all cosmetic.
Well, you can imagine that the practitioners will be very specialized, but that a salon might,
Right.
incorporate all of these different things.
I say, yeah.
One of the discussion points that was presented to me is it's harder in that industry to get the hours, like to get the number of hours as an apprentice. That is a difficult thing to.
In the microblading industry.
They just don't offer really apprenticeships. It's because they have courses and you can get certified.
So that was sort of part of the differentiation. It's, again, in consideration.
Yeah.
And I just imagine that there aren't as many existing people skilled in this to apprentice with as there are with tattoos or some of these other procedures.
Yeah, more and more people are getting certified, but then they're all new. So then
Mhm.
they wouldn't even fit the apprenticeship requirement really. But
Right.
yeah, that's why I got into it, because there's not a lot of people doing it.
Opportunity.
Yeah,
All right.
I also think the clientele would be a little different, who's going to see her versus his
Mhm.
shop,
Right.
like, to get those hours. I bet he gets a ton of hours, but she wouldn't see as many
Right,
clients, basically.
mhm,
'Cause it just seems like two different
right.
people that would go, if you're looking for something different,
yeah.
Right. All right, well, I think, for now, I think we have a lot to digest to, go back and review what's been written here with what we've heard, what we've learned. And then I think we can come back next month and discuss it in a little bit more detail and with a little bit more understanding, maybe. I think it'd be useful to look at other towns. I mean, that's what
she did.
she did.
So she looked at national regulations,
Right.
state regulations, the model MHOA.
Did you look at Northborough?
I don't know
Or the most-
specifically. I can ask. I know she looked at a lot and she spent a couple
By
months
she,
on
you
it.
mean the Great Meadows?
The Great Meadows,
Yeah.
the Great Meadows. She worked with an intern. She's the inspector.
Yeah.
So she's a health inspector. So that was one of the work that for the region that they did, is to review the regulations. And I can send you the draft model that they gave. We then edited it. I
Yeah.
Right. this
did some
incorporates that.
research and incorporated some of what was in our existing Concord. So I took what was an existing Concord regulation and working with Kurt, made some other changes, and I can send you both.
Yeah,
Um,
it would be, for me at least, it'd be helpful to get,
Mhm.
to see the Great Meadows, to see the, you know, if there's an example of another town that's done it differently, I'd be interested to see that, you know, that has them.
they're all a little bit different, and that's one of the biggest challenges for the industry.
Yeah.
And one of their frustrations is that every town has, to your point, like slightly different requirements. And that's a challenge, right? When you're trying to, work another in other towns or, like it's really hard to open another studio 3 towns over because their requirements are very different regulations and different boards of health and what their views are.
Yeah.
So, I guess part of our regional collaborative idea was to be more similar in the region. Bedford is more strict. So if you're looking for a more strict regulation, theirs is in our region, not one that is like this. It's more restrictive.
That's what I meant, that did she only look at our region?
No, she looks nationwide, state, she looked everywhere. Because I asked her a lot of questions about some of the like why choose this versus what was in our existing. And not too much was different except for the definitions, defining what's in there. And the training specifically for the semi-permanent makeup. Most of it wasn't too foreign, a lot of the similar content. There's some differentiation in body piercing that I kind of studied, went over with Dr. Kring. Some to try to make the best recommendation for health and safety. But I can send you guys all the base, what I was provided, and I get more details on which ones she looked at. There's a model reg I looked at. Boston Public Health Commission has a regulation. Bedford has a regulation they all have little bit different variations. And some of them are prohibitive. Like they're basically a regulation that makes it not easy to do. So that's kind of like, what's your goal? What is your end objective? Versus having, I guess my goal was to have health and safety, but people personal choice. But that's what I'm presenting, and that's for you to decide, right? I'm not gonna.
Well, right. I mean, I certainly agree with that. The question is just,
What is
what do we have to
that?
do to
Right,
have?
right.
How do we ensure that?
Right, right. No, I know. It's not, it's, there's a lot to it. I'm still learning.
Right. So we don't have an answer for you tonight, Katie, but we're working on it.
Okay.
and
I
we
just
really-
appreciate it, you guys. I really do.
Thank you. We're working and we want to make sure that it all works out well for everybody involved. So that's our goal here. And, both of your inputs really, really helpful for us tonight. So
Oh, yeah, glad to help. I'm my email away. If you guys have any questions about anything, I'd be happy to work with you on anything.
all right, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. So, yeah, I mean, to the extent that you can provide us with some of the
Sure.
source documents for the
I
next
can.
meeting, that would be helpful. And, I know you put some time and reviewed this. Thank you.
Sure, yes. One website that I just Googling while we were talking, there's browsthetics.com has courses and such listed. And there's a section called license and regulations. And it has links to the regulations that various towns have. So Bedford actually is not on there. Burlington is, Cambridge is, Concord is.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are similar, but they have like different prohibitions, different hours, to your point, different definitions. We added some wording about visitors. Kurt had asked that we, occasionally the Boston will have a big tattoo celebrate
Mhm.
event. And then they'll want to have somebody come from another state and have a guest tattoo, but they're licensed somewhere else, but like, can they come, to have, and that was in the model, the regulation we received, but we kind of I'll ask you to put a value difference. Like instead of a full price, like can there be a reduced price for a 2-week, tattoo artist to come to town?
Kurt always licenses them 100.
He pays the full amount and he's like, it's usually a loss. It's more like trying to get excitement and people and participate in this. And
He's been very successful.
he's well known and does a good job.
To get an appointment.
Well,
Yeah.
Where's he at?
right in West Concord.
Oh, he's right here.
He's
Yeah,
above
so
Gino.
Yeah.
It's our only tattooed establishment.
Okay.
And that's why we reached out to him.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a great idea.
Yeah, and
Okay.
we licensed him. I mean, it's been within our term work that I remember giving him his license because it was a big deal to have him come to Concord,
sure.
like,
Yeah.
it was a big deal. I feel so out of touch not knowing anything about my brows. It's like, they're really thin. I'm getting old.
So it does, I'll just mention, it does, I think we all have to look at this closer, but it does look like Bedford has, it's similar to the draft you had, that it's
Correct.
for microblading only, microblading, micropigmentation, permanent makeup. It's this 100-hour course and the 200 hours apprenticeship.
Correct.
And then they have 2,400 hours for body art. So if that's the one you thought was sort of strict, I mean, that kind of is.
There's some other, I
Yeah,
think there's other
right.
prohibitions in there. There's
Yeah,
other,
okay,
there's a lot
we
to
can look
them.
at the,
There's a lot of layers.
And it's a catch-22 and getting this training done,
Right.
because there's
Yeah, for
just not
sure.
a lot of people there for anybody to apprentice
Yeah.
with and study with. It's really limited.
I've had a good point about the apprentice, like having a certain amount of time before you take, once you become a body art person, technician, after you've been an apprentice, like how.
When do you become
it's
senior
almost
enough?
like
Right, we thought 4 years. He asked the colleagues in other towns. He really surveyed his network. To find out, get feedback.
Yeah.
On what would be what's a reasonable amount of time to expect somebody to be able to then teach someone, like how long. And when we put 4 years out there, we went back and forth in different timeframes. It's interesting, when I spoke to Katie, she didn't tell me about the certifications for different steps. She didn't tell me that. So she talked to you tonight. So that's a different thing to differentiate, in my opinion, in the regulation. And then the retraining, because of how that is a more fluid type. We didn't talk about this 10 years ago, probably, or 5 years ago, when
right.
and it is continuously evolving, because there's the hand application of microblading, and then they are using tattoo equipment.
She said it.
So we talked a little bit about,
On the tattoo gun.
When
I
she's
said,
doing-
That's a tattoo.
But that was the powder.
No,
Wrap
so
up.
when she first came in, she asked about microblading, and I said, well, you only about body art regulation, isn't that through cosmetology through Boston? And she said, no, I'm using a tattoo gun. Well, a tattoo gun means you're tattooing.
my original response to her is like, you're tattooing and you have to comply with our
Right.
current
And when-
tattoo
but when you
regulations,
say that,
or become before the Board of Health for a variance.
I think she said a small needle, but I don't think that matters with a tattoo gun, right?
But those. I mean,
The
maybe
gauge
she
of the
didn't
needle.
understand,
Imagine
but
it's- must be
that's the word she
consistent with
used.
what they're doing.
So when she said that, I was, I've been here long enough to know what a tattoo gun is, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, that's a tattoo then.
I think I think that's what she said. She said, I'm using a tattoo gun,
With a
but with a
small
small needle.
Yes, she's trying to differentiate, because the 2,400 hours is prohibitive
Yeah.
to
that's a
get
deal
the
breaker.
experience based on the current state of the industry.
Mhm.
I guess one concern I have is that the definitions are crisp enough that allow us to really differentiate between those two things, because it seems like there's a lot of wiggle room right now,
Mhm.
where if you're using a tattoo gun to do certain things,
Mhm.
where does it end?
Right.
And the more she talked, the more I thought similarly too.
Yeah.
Like the more she was speaking and talking about it, the
Mhm.
more I thought,
It's good in New York.
Right.
Today.
And I guess maybe from her perspective, if she is not interested in doing tattoos, right, but it wants to do microblading or this application of pigment in a cosmetic way,
Mhm.
then requiring her to do a tattoo apprenticeship, to use a tattoo gun, it's the same equipment, but in a different way, right? I can kind of empathize. I mean, I think what you wrote for this seems very reasonable to me, in that it's kind of a middle ground and does require, what is it? I guess a 12th of the practice hours, right?
right.
That would be required for it to be a tattoo artist.
She was arguing just the part one. She really, like when she originally
Yeah.
presented it to me, she was presenting she just had to do the part one
Mhm.
course.
Mhm.
And the more I looked into model regulations, I was like, no, all of them haven't also an
Yeah.
experience. And what that is and what you might want to change that to be is, this is a starting point. This regular, to me, this is like, here's a draft, here's an attempt to update.
In my medical experience, there was medical school and then there was residency. And you definitely would not have wanted me to be taking care of you just after medical school.
And
Yeah,
Kurt concurred
yes,
with that. When we
right,
talked about
right,
like the
yes.
practices of tattooing and what the apprenticeship was, he was like, yeah, you would need
In a
experience.
similar analogy, if you see me in the ER to, stitch up a cut that you did, you wouldn't also have required me to do a surgical residency, right? I received specific training in doing stitching for cuts, but I can't take your appendix out, and if we, as a board, require someone to, again, as an analogy, to have learned how to take your appendix out just to repair a cut, I think that's overkill,
And that's what she's kind of trying to present, I
I
think.
think, I think the differences between doing an eyebrow versus an
Right.
eagle with like talons, you know what I mean? Like, it's probably.
And the different
lot.
pieces on your body, like your
Yeah.
skin, it's all, I don't know.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And I understand, the hesitation about a tattoo gun, you're using the tattoo equipment, but I also, it's a tool and it depends on what you're doing with it. And just the fact that it's a tattoo gun, I think doesn't, in my mind, make it require you to do everything that you need to do to be a tattoo artist, right? It seems like a lot of the hours are, at least from what Kurt said, more of the building portfolio and learning experience with the art of tattooing. You can use the tool. In my mind, it seems like you would be able to use the tool safely with less than that amount of training. And so I like your middle ground, as it seems to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
So you
And our purpose is health and safety.
Great.
So that's what we want to make sure. You don't want it to go wrong. I mean, it just seems like being where it is, you just want somebody to really know what they're doing.
So 2 years ago, Mass Health Officers had a training for us, and they had some artists that were in the field present to all the health directors, right, and health inspectors. And they had examples of what could go wrong. And the woman that was there pretty much asked there to be a standard and a license, like a uniform, like consistent training requirement.
Mhm.
That it wasn't something that people should be going to go out and do without some sort of regulation. And so it was on our radar anyways, to do.
Mhm.
I kind of asked the region, this is one you can do for all of us, is update these regs. Because it's something that if people want to do, it should be some sort of standard.
Uniformity, yeah, in uniformity, yes, I think is a great idea.
Right. So, okay, in terms of a next step on this one, does this need to be modified at all before we really read it with a little bit more depth and or for the next meeting? We're considering some possible differences in numbers of hours.
Mark? tweaked some of it.
Well, so my edits, I mean, you can,
Those are
they're really just
I-
like
those are
typo
like-
type.
But you
They're-
can get-
they're just my-
you could send you copies of acting.
I,
Mhm.
I think it's more looking at other ones.
Yeah,
To
and
see
then-
if we're comfortable. To me, the big question is, like, I really, like your points that, it's not, it doesn't necessarily require the same level of training. But it's figuring out what's the right level from a health and safety
Mhm.
standpoint. And like, this might be the right level or it might not. Like, I think looking at some other examples
Mhm.
So would those
Would-
be the
would
ones?
probably just get me comfortable that what
It's
you guys
totally
put together is the right.
Go state regulation
It's-
ground,
I-
like we go with the state regulations and kind of tailor it.
No,
down to us,
I'll
or-
get whatever, I mean,
guess, just
I'll
a
ask-
standard.
And we're talking about the model regs. Is there a model reg for microblading?
so
specifically?
Mass Health Officers Association and Boston Public Health Commission and the state have model regulations. They're
Microblading?
Or is it just body art?
for body art.
Right.
And within body art is included these definitions.
And it doesn't,
And-
doesn't
yeah.
separate it out with the number of hours that are different the way you did.
Yes, they
It does. Oh, it
That's
does.
why it's like
Oh,
that.
okay.
So this is based off of.
Correct.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, great.
Correct.
Well,
So
that-
it
That
was,
makes sense to me. Yeah.
Okay.
but I don't mind showing you the source documents,
Sure.
like, because you might find something else that you would rather, swap out. I already kind of did that a little bit, but I think you have a different perspective, which is good.
My very brief glance as we were talking at that website that I mentioned, it seemed like a lot of towns either don't specify at all or have the 2,400 hours or have the 200 hours. Just kind of just looking at a couple different towns. So,
It's really,
yeah, which is funky.
it's it's fascinating that the state doesn't have a regulation about it, that they leave it up to localities. Like I don't,
Because then they have state, then it's their licensure. They want us to,
Mhm.
Yeah, this website says the regulations for microblading, tattooing, or body art in Massachusetts are governed by the local cities and towns. You need to comply with the regulations published by the locality in which you plan to practice. Which, yeah,
that
Which
can make
the
it-
first
is-
set of ones we did was basically the model.
Right,
We plugged in a few things.
Right.
and We adopted it.
right, right.
it's very similar to like the old, ours was just. The
Because
old,
we had nothing,
Right.
so we had to get something. And then
I would just find a different career. But that's me.
very, very busy.
All right, so we're set for next month. We're ready to
Let's
move.
have the Discussion, further discussion.
Further discussion next month.
On the source documents.
Uh,
And then, right?
And then modify those, if there's a need for modification of
Yeah.
this draft, we will do it at that next meeting. And then that would be June, that we would be ready to take a vote on it.
Have a public
June,
hearing.
we would.
Have a public
we would
hearing.
Have a public hearing,
Okay,
and in June, we're on Zoom.
right. Okay. To be continued then.
Okay.
All right, next is reorganization of the board. It's really fun talking about this, knowing that it might not be me that has to do that. So,
Microblading.
right, so the tradition is that we all get to serve as chair and
I'm just supposed to, but
2 times, I don't think in our time here, Mark and I started the same year. I don't think I've seen people do 2 times, but I think almost everybody has done 2 years. As
Right,
Ray
they've done
did,
there 2 times consecutive.
right, that's what it is,
that's what's happened of
Right.
late.
right, because, yeah. My 2 predecessors were on it for 2 years as chair, and I've been for 2 years as chair. And it's somebody else's turn now. So the logical choice would be Mark, just because you're all pretty new to this.
Yes, very
Um,
much appreciate
Not
not
taking
being the
on
chair at
that.
this point. Yes.
How do you feel about it, Mark? You ready?
I've managed to dodge it for all this time. Very definitely. And I know that I will break I only have 1 year left, so I know
So
that
it's like,
I can only do 1 year. So I'm willing to do it if everyone wants me to do it. It's not the top of my list of things to do, but
you don't want to meet with me and talk about public health?
I'm always happy to do it.
And I'm still
Um,
going to help you with it.
Yeah, I think Jill will still be very involved because I'm just the lawyer here. I'm not the public health person the same way. So But yeah, I dodged it as long as I could. So I think if it's my turn and I have to do it now, I can do it now.
Do we have to officially vote that?
Oh, yes, somebody needs to nominate him.
I nominate. Yes.
My second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, Mark.
Yay.
All right.
Thank you.
You know,
So now
nobody,
all of you can think about a year from now.
Well,
Somebody
yeah,
will have
somebody
to.
will have to,
but the good
because
news
these
is,
two are leaving.
like, nobody
Yeah.
showed up for the public hearing tonight. Like, I was
Yeah.
all ready for my big moment. and, you know, nobody showed up.
Last one, we got green.
Oh, my God, we had some terrible ones during that. And then,
Yeah,
like,
including we had news cameras.
news
Yeah.
cameras and like the water bottle, you know, issues. We had news cameras. I mean, we, you know, we,
Doesn't make any difference.
no, you know, we did the water bottle.
Oh, the banning.
Yeah.
I was picturing, a really raucous hearing.
It wasn't, it wasn't, we didn't push it, we didn't originate it, but it all went
Right.
through us. So
You didn't endorse it.
Yeah.
It was
Oh, boy.
assigned
You
to
just took the heat.
we took the heat, we take the heat on a lot of things. I mean, the mask mandates, we took the heat on, so.
The
no.
board did not want to ban water bottles.
Water's
Now
not
there's
good.
Coke.
Go back
and
through the minutes of
Gatorade
this and see who
Right.
voted for it. Who did.
No, there's cardboard boxes of water. You know what? So in Guatemala, they had little pouches, little plastic pouches of water. I just saw, they weren't like Capri Sun, they were little plastic bags, and I saw all these kids taking sips and then just tossing them at each other. So that was really bad. Okay, moving on. So Mark, thank you. You'll be running this next time. So yeah, so this all came out because there's somebody in the town manager's office that is paying much more attention than ever before to people's terms. And
Well, as much attention as was previously paid attention to when Laurel was in the, years ago.
so there was a couple of years of a
We
gap,
had a little bit of a lack.
right? So somebody's paying attention and I got an email saying, yeah, as of town meeting, it should be a transition. So I have another week. So town meeting's next week.
Sometimes it can be May.
It's important to me that you go to the chair's breakfast.
Okay.
And talk to the other people in the community and select board and have a voice and talk what we're doing with the other chairs. That is something that is to continuously advocate for the health division and that you keep our voice in the works.
It's a lot of chairs too.
And if
Just
you
so you
can't
know.
Oh,
have
and you,
somebody else who
so
goes
I
for
heard
it,
that you, like, somebody, did Matt not show up the day that, when you went for me? Did Matt show up?
Which,
So Matt Johnson is the select board member who was running the chair's breakfast, but he wasn't there that month.
yeah,
I saw
I think he
something.
wasn't there. Yeah, there was another gentleman who kind of stepped in
Okay, good.
and took over for it and I thought did a great job, but yeah,
Okay, good.
I think Matt was not there.
He wasn't there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting when things come up. I mean, I was there last week and so one of the agenda items on the town warrant is the fast food bylaw. So extending, changing the definition of fast food. So there was a letter to the editor in the Concord Bridge about, well, don't worry about the trash because there's a polystyrene ban in town. So I, at the chair's breakfast, said, the polystyrene ban is limited. There's all of this other plastic that's still very much available. And we pass waivers every year. A handful of waivers do come up every year. It's getting less, right? Two, but there's, it's
and
gone
then-
down.
And then they withdrew, remember? It was
Deaconess and,
just for one little thing now.
right. Well, Emerson, bike board.
Well,
I can't.
interesting.
It's because the
Well, you can't-
lids
Uh,
can be broken apart and used to hurt,
Yeah.
used to cut yourself.
Yep.
So, but I shared that, that waivers exist and that people do get them, and they were like, everybody's like, really? Like, they had no idea. So
Because that was another thing that was put upon.
that was
Board
put
of
on
Health.
upon the Board of Health. And another one that you'll hear about is, so the ag committee, there's an ag committee in town, and last year at town meeting, a fee for paper bags was passed. And the ag and
No plastic.
for paper bags was passed, and the Board of Health is in there as the ones that enforce it. This isn't in effect yet, which is why it hasn't happened.
Marcia,
And the farmer stands, the
That's-
calls from the farm stands.
And that's what was coming up. Like I was confronted, as soon as I walked in the room last week, you're Jill. Let me talk to you about this.
Because you're putting in like potatoes, I mean, you're,
Oh, and it's like health related to food? Is that-
No, there's no reason it should be on it.
Yeah,
Marcia
Right.
assured
It's in the
us
nexus.
100 times over that
It wasn't happening.
it was not happening for the health department to be tasked with this duty.
Right, because at that point, when this came up, Melanie wasn't on staff yet and Susan was gone. And that's when I was looking really closely at these things. And I was like, you can't put this on
She said
them.
it was recyclable, and it should have been the other.
DPW should have it. Anyway, these are the things you get to talk about
Yeah.
at the chair's breakfast, which is really interesting.
We talked mostly about the Best Western
Mm.
and
That's a big issue.
transporting. That was the
Right.
huge, like, people were getting heated over that.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So we were kind of.
How often is the breakfast?
It's monthly.
Yeah.
It's monthly. It's an 8 a.m. breakfast. Last week was funny because they brought food. It used, it's been hybrid, it's been on Zoom for years.
Mm.
Then recently it's become hybrid and they're like, oh, come have breakfast, have coffee. They forgot the coffee.
Yeah.
And all of the paperware was locked up.
Oh, yes.
So they couldn't serve
Can't
any of
use
the
styrofoam.
breakfast. No, there was just nothing. And it showed up at like 10 of 9 and everybody bolted to get whatever, because they're starving at this point and trying to get to work.
Wow.
Anyway, it's fun.
We
Okay,
locked the door. so
Right.
we escaped.
so, right.
Haven't changed your mind yet?
Like you tell me all this. after the vote.
It is good. I mean, when I was there last week also, though, it was an opportunity to advocate, because there's the other issue in town meeting is that there is this appropriation of the opioid settlement money, which is what is coming due to the health department.
correct.
And it's what Melanie and I have been working on with this behavioral health collaborative. And there were 2 select board members in the meeting last week when I got to talk about this. And it was really important that I be able to talk about it to this group, because these select board members were like, well, we need to see the data. And I was able to say, well, the data is really hard to come by because we're not getting the information, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was an opportunity for people that have influence in how things happen in town, got to hear what some of our challenges are and what we're trying to do.
And also for me to hear, for Jill to call back and say, this is what was being said. Melanie."
Right, I called her
Like, this is where
immediately.
you need to articulate and it was good. So.
So, but before you go into that, chair and board member reports.
I jumped the gun, yeah.
Okay, so I did want to just, mention that, so if you're going to town meeting, the consent agenda also has money for the public health nurse. You need to approve that. And you need to approve Article 14, which is the appropriation of the opioid settlement money. It's really an accounting issue. The money was given to the town after the town budget was approved last year, so it has to go through this formal appropriation. And that was that. What I would like to hear, and Kurt, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I understand you went to the tour or the 2229
I
meeting.
paddled.
And I would love to hear what you learned, if you don't mind sharing, and I should have prepared you for that, but
No, that's fine. It's an interesting site. It's a complicated site. It's got a long history of contamination. My impression is that it's well run in terms of the investigation remediation. The site itself is pretty unique just based on the complicated topography. They've got a peat bog there, which is a pretty impressive natural feature. And it abuts a series of trails, which I am not personally familiar with, but the Knox Trail system that apparently people use pretty routinely.
I can interrupt, sorry, where is this located?
Oh, so this is 2229 Main Street. So if you know where the, what's it called? The ice skating rink,
Yeah.
the rope
The
club.
road club.
Oh, okay.
It's right in that area. So it's just about on the Acton
Oh,
line.
interesting.
It's not far from the Assabet River.
wait, Brenda, are you not familiar with this project?
Not super.
So this is an EPA Superfund site here in Concord.
Yeah,
We have a prison, we have an EPA Superfund site,
Yeah. and a Best Western.
Yeah.
Yes,
Not anymore.
That's
It's not
right,
Best
yeah, not
Western.
Western anymore. Yes, I live just like 3 doors down from the Best Western, so I
Oh, okay.
noticed the sign.
You see
around.
people walking.
Yes, yes, anyway.
Okay.
So historically,
Thank you.
they processed radionuclides. I think they made armor piercing bullets and other things like that. So they use radionuclides and there are releases of radionuclides into soil and groundwater at the site. And they also use solvents. So there's also a groundwater plume that's going towards Acton's wells and also towards the Assabet River. So fairly complicated because you've got this complex topography and there's also very complicated bedrock geology. So once you get into that, it just makes it what I call a complex site. But I think they've got a good handle on it. The contractors who are involved seem to know what they're doing, and there's a lot of EPA oversight. It's been investigated for decades now, and it's getting into the remediation phase.
When did it close? Do you know? Like, when was the last actively?
In the
90s?
90s.
2000, in 1999, 2000 was when,
Really?
and it was officially abandoned in 2010.
And then recognized as a Superfund site shortly after?
Not before that, I think.
Oh, before that.
Before that,
Yeah.
yeah.
There was a gentleman there that was working, I thought, that was actually bringing in materials to store there from the south, from what I read. That there was more complicated than that in the sense that he was actually looking to permit to bring contaminated materials in.
Like to store it there?
Yeah, yeah, and they stopped him from doing that.
Yeah,
And that gentleman had to stay on site to help with the cleanup. Is that, did you hear about that?
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really complicated. It was really not a good site.
So I guess where they are now is they're in the remediation phase. So they're doing work to clean up the different areas of the site, kind of going piece by piece in the different areas. But apparently there haven't been many complaints by nearby residents. They're doing concrete breaking, so they have very thick building foundations and they're breaking the slabs up, which is pretty loud and intrusive, but apparently there haven't been too many complaints.
And are there risks of spreading any exposure from doing that? I remember they're doing it in a way that mediates,
They should be,
mitigates.
they should have mitigation measures. They should have air monitoring equipment up and taking samples to ensure there's no excess exposure.
Mhm.
So,
All this stuff hasn't been removed already?
no, over the next, I think, 3 years.
2 or 3 more years. It's like a variable schedule.
Yeah, so they're just doing it in phases so that it minimizes the impact to the community and also just workability because it is pretty complex topography, so it's hard to get equipment and move around.
Because it's kind of hilly and the bedrock.
very
you're
hilly,
saying,
yep.
and, yeah. I think it'll be interesting in the next couple of years because, there's conversations about what to do with the land.
Yeah, they are using residential cleanup standards and their depths they're talking about are down to, I think, 10 feet. So pretty extensive depths and realistically, any resident wouldn't be going down to 10 feet in any foreseeable situation.
I still think there's going to be like a psychological barrier to, people wanting to live there.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting site to visit. It's an interesting opportunity for the town.
Well, thank you for.
The desire by EPA is for the town to take responsibility. Because then there will be administrative oversight undetermined at this time.
But I thought that the EPA is kind of committed in perpetuity. So to clean up operations, they're committed in perpetuity.
Yeah.
So, but administratively, they want the town to
Correct.
manage it.
So there's not going to be, or what they're communicating is that if there's something is discovered or overcome, it's not going to be the town's responsibility to pay for that. But they're looking for an entity to have some sort of oversight.
Mhm.
The fact that they got it to residential, that,
It's not there yet.
no, but that was pretty impressive that they got them to agree to residential standards. That's what Graham would say.
Uh-huh.
All of the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee. Most Superfund sites don't. They don't go to that standard, from what I understood.
That's correct. I would agree with that. That's fairly unusual.
They work hard for that.
But it's the most conservative assumptions going into it.
That's good.
Yeah, so it's a good thing for the
Good
town.
Right. All right. Any other board member reports? Anything to share? Okay, then Melanie, if you want to update us on what's going on.
I will. I will add just a little bit, Kurt, that town has also now a committee that I'm on, that is becoming more informed, becoming more involved. 229 Main Street has always had a committee. But, and board, we've always paid attention. Karen's been monitoring, supporting that for forever. But I think now there is town manager's office and the, different engineering, DPW, health, planning. There's a committee that's gonna, from town staff, is going to be start looking into this and being more informed. There's an extensive report from 2021 that was drafted and done about the future use that Marcia Delia in this building suggested that I read. And it has a lot of information about what they proposed, the committee that worked on it, the different ideas for the future reuse. So it's a really good document if you're interested. I did read it, and it, different as discussions move forward and people might ask you from Board of Health, that was like different scenarios of what the sections are of the site and what the probable or proposed uses are. So that might inform you about where people are coming from, if you're interested.
Where would we find it?
It's on the 2229 Main Street. If you just put in for Town of Concord, 2229 Main Street Superfund, reuse recommendations, the dates 2021. It was finished, and it's a pretty comprehensive document. But talks a lot. The Maximus is the contractor or the people that are working to do the cleanup.
Was Bruce on site, Kurt, when you went out there?
Yeah, there's a lot of, so there's some good, it gives you some good meat to chew into, some data and what the different zones are. The property's been built up into, they give them letters. So like what can be used, and so when people talk to you about certain areas of the site, which ones are never going to be able to, they're going to be capped, you can't touch it ever. What sites are going to be natural forever? What sites are then possible development and what that might look like. So I want to talk about White Pond. Last year, the town contracted with two people, John Higgins from APOD Technologies and Nancy Leland, a scientist that to work and study and monitor what's going on at White Pond. The APOD technology kind of captures the cyanobacteria bloom and removes it. Nancy Leland was studying indicator organisms, if you will, on what could be possible toxin level in the pond. We were under the impression, and I thought that Nancy is a 2-year commitment and that Nancy was going to come back this year. And then we would be evaluating our next steps. Like, did it work? What do we want to do for White Pond moving forward? She is not available and did not want to do any work this year. So on Thursday, she did agree to come and train us on the water sampling, the technique. So I've never used a fluorometer to know what that is, what that entails, because what the procedure is measure the zooplankton in the water, what's going on, to look at the water and then make that into a predictive model for the amount of toxin that could be in the water. Last year we looked at the data, interpreted it, but we looked at the water, but we didn't do the part in the middle. We didn't measure the water and we didn't make the measurements into predictive data. So we need to learn how to do that, and in order to use the existing proposed model. Follow me? So we're going to learn how to do that and continue to monitor White Pond this year in that way.
You had said that Susan was going to help you?
Susan's coming. She has experience, but she's coming to basically make sure we train us, can transfer knowledge, right? The health, the cyanobacteria is on the Board of Health. Okay, the state DPH has guidelines on cyanobacteria and the regulation and what if we have a bloom, we're supposed to report to the state then informs us when long we're supposed to be closed.
Which you always do.
We always have done. This level of monitoring is not the state standard. It is way above. Okay, way above.
Is that because of the technology that's in there?
That's the expectation of the residents of the pond. So this is not, the minimum standard for the state is if you see a bloom, you can take a sample to get toxin for toxin, and if it turns green, you close it, you're closed minimum of 2 weeks. And the residents at White Pond want a lot more detail, understanding what's happening. There's just greater study and trying to understand what could be happening and any mitigation measures. There's a whole task force that is currently working to advise the town manager's office and the select board on the best next steps. That's ongoing. So our part is the water quality and the toxin. So that's what we're going to continue to look into and do this year and see how that goes. We did not have an official bloom last year where we officially closed and informed the state. We thought it was gonna happen and it never did, which was, everybody was happy about that. Was that because the APOD was working and removed? Or was it because it was no rain, there was no rain all summer, the weather? There's too many factors to determine. We couldn't say scientifically anything X and Y meant Z, there was no conclusion. So we'll see how happens this year.
How about the year prior? Is it typically always a bloom or is it?
The year prior had been closed a lot.
Oh, really?
It had been extensively closed and had turned very green.
Like like every year it seemed to be increasing, like the frequency of closures, it seems, in my experience.
There's a lot of citizen scientists, a lot of data that I haven't even touched the tip of, like out there that people have collected on the pond about the Secchi disk, that's a turbidity over time, different other weather conditions, temperature. People have done a lot of work. There's a lot of information trying to figure, but there's no conclusive evidence right now about what's causing the toxin, is it the warmer weather? That's a hypothesis. People have talked about species of fish, people pointing fingers at the septic systems. Been a lot of different drainage farms, I have there's a lot of different ideas out there. And none of them has been yet, like, there's no smoking gun that's come out of the woods that like, oh, that's what we can do to stop to help the pond. But it's a beautiful place and a lot of interest in preserving it. The town has the beach there. So we're going to continue to move to try to work there. That's the plan right now. Any questions on White Pond?
It's a
I
new
said
committee,
Susan.
right? With White Pond as a new,
There's a
Yeah.
White
we
Pond
discussed that at the meeting too.
task force.
Yeah, there's a task force.
Task force, I don't know.
And they have a charter that basically in this year to make a recommendation about what's the next step, what's the next best step about White Pond. Looking at all kinds of other, the APOD technology that's a rent to own. That's going to also to continue this year.
We're renting it.
It's like we're gonna own it by the end of this year, it's less money, and I think the idea is that the town would own it. That's managed by natural resources. Let's see, what I handed out, so Jill's been working with us in the Concord Public Health Collaborative, that's what we called our group. Had two main functions. One is to identify how we're going to spend the opioid settlement funds, make a recommendation to the town manager. And two, to understand mental health. So what all our public health needs assessments through the hospital, through the school, talks about the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic or the mental health being a concern in our community. So we drafted a memo kind of outlining to the select board and the town manager what we were thinking of doing. And then the feedback was we needed a lot more detail about what the plan was. The select board wanted to know data, information, details on why we were saying what we're saying, and what we were planning to do. And our answer was, well, we want to do a public health needs assessment and figure out what So we're meeting on Wednesday. The group has been meeting since January. We meet about once a month. On Wednesday, the police are going to present their data and talk about what their needs are. And also, I think we're gonna hear from the school department some and try to make some action steps and make best recommendations to move forward.
Give those steps to Carrie.
Correct. So on the town meeting agenda is a consent to approve this, to say that Carrie gets to decide, you know, how the Board of Health, like she's gonna get to decide how to spend the opioid settlement monies. The state has specific guidelines, like it's supposed to be used on substance use prevention, reduction of harm, you know, specific treatment activities. Did you want to read it?
No, I mean, I'm just looking at, I mean, I don't really want to read it. It's, you know, really to determine whether the town will vote to appropriate the sum for the purpose of funding substance use disorder prevention, harm reduction, treatment and recovery programs. When we were saying that we got something, the police will be reporting on some of this data, like we did hear earlier from them. It was like crazy numbers of how many calls they take that are either substance use related or mental health related. I mean, you see it in the hospital. I mean, the police data was already really high. We know this from, you know, the youth risk behavior survey, and we just know it's really high. So anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, so this memo is like the original memo, but with some ideas that have been discussion in the group about some possible prevention collaboration work in our regional collaborative, some ideas about, you know, long-term police and COA would like a clinician in the town. Probably not using opioid settlement fundings for that. We might get a grant or try to get a clinician. But also like what I keep trying to explain to people is we need to understand the data we're looking for will inform our prevention, like our outreach, our prevention upstream of the actual crisis that police are seeing. So we're really working to get everybody to put that together. And it's been interesting. I think I'm almost there to explain what I'm talking about when we say data, but
I think what's also useful about this, which I don't think Carrie understands yet, is that bringing together all of these different parties has in itself been beneficial.
Yes.
To everybody sharing information on their programming, on what they're dealing with, and people are learning. These are, you know, different, the schools, the rec department, you know, police, council on aging. I mean, it's been a lot of mutual learning, and there's a lot of benefit in that.
You know what I don't understand? I'm gonna ask this question. I don't understand the confusion about what to use it for.
I don't either,
I don't either.
but I keep trying.
I don't either.
It has specific instructions as to what it can be used for.
Correct. I think so too, but
How much money is it?
so it's an average of $20,000 a year for the next 18 years.
Wow.
We have $70,000 in the bank, so there's like, it's front loaded and right now there's $70,000. It's after town meeting will be available.
Right.
And then we have to spend it all in this year? No, it can sit there in an account, but it's like it is finite. We did apply there's different ways of this money. So there's the first people that were responsible, and now there's like the pharmacies. There's another way that we also, Chris Carmody in the town manager's office is on it, right? He's working on making sure the town has a voice and puts her name on that list to get monies. The second thing that's on the town meeting agenda that I want, it's also on the consent agenda, but I promised last time, I think somebody had asked me this is the draft public health nursing position. Somebody I spoke to, one of you had asked for some information on, so this is the draft job description. And what the role we're looking for and what we would do.
This would be good, because I mean, this will be, if anybody asks a town meeting, it will be really useful to have this.
Correct, I think it must have been you, but I
Might have been
can't,
me.
it wasn't in the minutes. She looked, I was like, somebody asked me for this, and so I'm gonna bring it. This is the draft position that I worked on with Maynard. The current position, through the budget hearing process is like 6/10 60%. And the concept is to share with the town of Maynard. So they're gonna have about 15 hours a week in this position, doing traditional public health nursing, disease monitoring, outreach, community work, but also there's wording in here about prevention, about outreach, but that's what specialties of public health nurses working with your community, like who your community are, what they need as far as outreach, education. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Why Maynard?
Because they were also in our, yeah, so when we're all Emerson Home Care and didn't have a nurse,
Hmm.
they got dropped too.
I see.
Gotcha. Concord and Carlisle and Lincoln the person that worked there, they hired Trish McGee. Direct, they just had money and we were tied into our contract with Emerson Home Care that then they asked to resolve. I also know the health director in Maynard.
Sure. Just curious.
And he called me and said, what are you doing about a nurse? I'm like, I don't know, what do you have? We're desperate. We really need a nurse.
Yeah.
So right now, we're paying extra money through the collaborative. We have 5 hours a week for the regional money and then additional contracting, additional 5 hours a week for our public health nurse disease monitoring. And that's like barely getting us through Maven, right? That is like the bare minimum. Anytime we have ideas to talk about mental health at the schools, we had a problem, but on and off months. Last month, first the state says yes, it's no, then it's not months. So that's taken a lot of time. There's some unconfirmed TB cases that she has to follow up on, just time consuming cases in the tick-borne non-Lyme, but the other tick-borne diseases are follow-ups as well. Any questions on public health nursing?
When do you want to hire this person by? Like when?
July 1st. So if it passes town meeting, we will post. We have to work on the intermunicipal agreement and the money, that detail. But it's a cart and horse until it's approved. Don't do the work,
Right.
you know, I'm in that. The idea would be July 1st. The position right now would be housed in the basement of Harvey Wheeler. That's unconfirmed. There's no others. I don't have a spot. I need a private room with a door. For a public health nurse, so that's the other challenge, is space. There isn't another ounce of space in this building that we could cut up. Upstairs conference room, but the new deputy town manager is in there right now. So. And that was my short list of top. We're very busy with food inspections. We're doing septic on-site wastewater, is on continuing. We have quite a bit on the docket for tomorrow. We had some housing complaints that are ongoing.
Inspections probably start soon.
Camp and pools are taking off. So this year, we're gonna use a software called Pool Code Pro to do our pool inspections. Just making that an electronic form instead of a paper form. Training our new inspector on the pool code as well. Housing code is updated, but not been officially promulgated. So it's been approved, but we haven't been told green light go, on that. It's supposed to be in April, but there's one more week in April. And that puts a lot of wording and definitions actually on shelters and what essentially exempts shelters from the housing code. So there's a lot in there that helped us inform when we were going to look at what the needs are over at our shelter.
Would exempt them now?
Yeah, they have a lot more flexibility because there is shelter in the housing code that for space and living square footage and things like that. We did do a food inspection over at the shelter. Are working with them. The pool is not going to be opened, right? They're fenced it off. They're not gonna open the pool. And we're working with them on their trash, and they went from a hotel to like full occupancy with a lot of people.
I saw the septic getting pumped recently.
And in the septic system getting
On
on.
monthly.
They had it serviced and looked at prior to onset and we advised them to monitor it and then figure that out because it was gonna be a big change.
Mm.
Big change in what was used for people to come and go versus stay there. I had some reach out from the rec department. Somewhere between 11 and 18, the number keeps changing of students that they would very much like to get into the rec program for the summer. The code though, for the camp code says they have to have immunizations and they're in school without immunizations being exempt. That's a state law, but so I may be asking you to consider, letting them come to summer camp and exempt from the immunization requirement. We reached out today just to see, can we provide immunization? Is the first choice, right?
Right.
The first choice is
Like
like,
that'd
well,
be
let's get
ideal.
vaccinated, right? That's the message that I sent out today to the management of MOC, the third party that's managing it, and the state contact that I have saying, how about, I'll bring somebody to give it a shot. I'll find them. I don't know where, but like,
Right.
we don't have vaccines here because we don't have a public health nurse, but you can, and some towns do.
Right.
I'm not gonna make.
But I imagine that's something that people would be happy to help find. you know?
I can find like probably a doctor's office in Concord, a pediatrician, or West Concord Pharmacy or somebody to make that happen. So that's kind of what I started working on a little bit today.
That'd be ideal.
That's the ideal. But the second thing is, I don't feel those kids should be in the hotel room all summer. Like, it's a hotel room.
Yeah.
So my feeling is that they should be outside at a rec program. So just trying to get an answer from the state about ideas and solutions. But we have local authority. That's what I did. We can make the board could make an exemption if they chose. But that's kind of where we're at with that. So I don't really have an answer. Like, first is trying to find out. We've had a couple of calls. Karen fielded some calls last week about people looking for immunizations.
From the
They're
shelter.
looking for immunizations, they're not looking for an exemption.
Okay.
Yeah, they were looking for immunization.
That
So
was a good thing.
but we felt good about that. And so we're trying to, I first reached out to this collaborative saying, I don't know who has a nurse that has doing childhood vaccines. The town I worked before, like Medford, it was like every week,
Right.
TB testing and vaccines, like it was a regular stream of students, young families coming in, but we don't have
When
that
the
right now in
state- when the
Concord.
State changed how they manage their vaccines and they went to those call them bunkers all throughout the United States. We used to have the vaccines here and then we distribute them to the doctor's offices. And the state changed that.
Yeah, they don't.
Right? So once that happened, we kind of lost, we just kind of forgot about it, to be honest with you, because it
Right.
was the immunization program for children, is what
Right.
it was called.
Right. Well,
So.
And-
That's why we can't get them back.
Right, and then the only thing internally, we are meeting with the at-risk, we call it Concord at-risk, it used to be called the Concord Hoarding Task Force. We are meeting internally once a month to talk about housing cases that are complex. So
these are meetings with police. and
police,
council on Aging.
fire, council on aging, social services, the veterans agent, Board of Health, just, work on individual cases and, inform each other about who's going where. So trying to see what we can do to help people.
That's for homes that are kind of like hoarding houses
Mhm.
type of
It
situation
could,
around.
we
town.
call it at risk, mental health, substance use, hoarding. It's a big umbrella
Okay.
and any number of those things that may be going on that involve sometimes it's like, so if there's a domestic abuse, like that's pretty defined. We have good policies and procedures in Concord for support that, but there's some people that based on their personal dynamic or their family, they have a lot of overlapping needs or, COA might be dealing with somebody or fire like today. They say, oh, we've been to this house this many times and nobody knew about, like, okay, they keep calling fire, but let's figure out Like, who else can help them and why is that happening and that type of thing.
It's good that you're all working together.
I think so.
Definitely.
It's a busy department. Thank you. Anything else for that?
I think it's, top line.
Karen's falling asleep. All right, let's finish this meeting up. We need to go, just want to look at the calendar. We have a couple of more meetings, coming up in the spring. We have May 16th is the next meeting. That will be hybrid. But on June 20th, it's Zoom only. Is everybody available for those 2 dates? Okay, excellent. Like I've mentioned before, but for those of you new to this, we often end up not having summer meetings, but we might. Hard to say, but we might. The other last thing to do is look at the minutes from February 2020, February.
Everyone see what I resent?
Yeah, you sent it this afternoon.
Yeah, so what,
Mark said I sent the wrong one.
yeah, so what she resent, she sent in March. So in March, we had drafts.
Right,
We gave Karen comments and there was more comments than, it wasn't just a couple things. And so it was,
Incorporated your,
you did, that's after the meeting. So after the meeting in March, you incorporated the edits and you sent it out to everybody.
and then I put the wrong one.
And then just in the agenda, you put the old one.
okay, so we don't have
So we had
anything.
already seen them a month ago.
Okay,
It was just that the email on Friday had the old version, not the new version.
okay, so we can't approve them though? or
No, so we
did.
can, it's just, I had Karen resend it so that you all had
Got
the
it,
newer ones.
got it.
Um,
It's this, so it was in the mail today. It's what you sent us this afternoon.
I just sent.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
okay,
But also she sent it on like March 15th
got it,
or something,
yes.
I sent it
After-
the day after.
the day after the snowstorm day.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve these minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
And a second? Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you for approving the minutes. Okay.
We'll
I-
have March and April, hopefully in May.
Okay,
That's my goal.
that would be good.
Isn't that bad?
All right, I believe then that is the last order of business. Is there a motion to close the meeting?
Motion to close the meeting.
And a second? All in favor? Oh, yes. Thank you so much.